square.
Content, information, and opinions expressed during the related show are those of the show personalities and guest alone, and not those of Vic Canellis Media Group, its parent, affiliates, or stations. VCMG Live is not responsible for any content, information, or opinions expressed. User bears full responsibility for their reliance on such content, information, or opinions.
Welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. With over 20 years of real estate experience and selling over 150 homes a year, Laura Sanders is the #1 RE/MAX agent in the state of Florida for 2021. Join us each week as we discuss how to make money through buying and flipping homes, to renting versus selling, and everything in between. To join the conversation, call in live. 888-994-4995, Studio A.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. Every week we talk about something that helps you save a little money, make a little money, or maybe just helps you navigate this crazy world that we live in. So every week we talk about something different. Last week we were talking about deposits and how do you get the buyer's deposit? It was such an interesting conversation. We ran out of time. I decided to bring our famous lawyer from JK Closings, Nick Fiorello, back to talk about how do you get the buyer's deposit? Like, what happens? Like, does it get released? Like, what goes on in this whole scenario? So, welcome, Nick. Welcome back again. I'm so glad you can join us again. And like I said, we're going to talk about this deposit that we get. Like, you have all these terms of the contract, right? When you get your first deposit, when you get your second deposit, the inspection period, due diligence, what you're responsible. Like, this is why you hire someone like me to be your agent, to make sure that you're navigated through this, in the best way possible. So I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've seen a lot of crazy things. Typically, if I feel a buyer has defaulted on a contract, I cannot interpret the contract as a realtor. So sellers need to know, first of all, your realtors cannot interpret the contract. So that's why I always give my sellers to an attorney to do their closing docs, because it costs the same as for them to use the title company that the buyers picked. Yeah. And guess what? They're not your friend. They're not your friend.
Nope. Even
though they're representing the transaction, they could care less.
Who hired them?
The buyer.
Exactly. So where do they lean in a situation where there's an argument?
And you have the title companies that aren't run by attorneys, so that sometimes can be an issue as well.
And they muddy the waters too, because they give legal advice all the time when they shouldn't, and then inappropriately and mistakenly, their clients think they might have a claim, whatever it may be.
Right. So I always tell my sellers, listen, even if it's $50 more or $100 more, like, go with the attorney. It's not that you need them, but you might need them.
Of course.
Because I know how to read the contract, right? So that's not a problem. But the question is sellers, I love my favorite one, right? The seller says, buyer comes back, it's 3 days in the contract. They have a 10-day inspection period, and the buyer says, I changed my mind. I don't want it anymore. And the seller goes, oh, I get to keep their deposit? I'm like, no. And now, I don't know, is that interpreting the contract? Like, no. I don't think so, right? But no. I'm like, no, you can't keep their deposit because they had an inspection period. They're not obligated to have an inspector come in during the inspection period.
No.
They're not.
They can back out of the contract for whatever
the sky
reason
is
they want.
red.
The sky was purple that day. They
want
walked
it to
in,
be
they got
blue.
bad juju from the house. You never know.
Right.
You never know what it is.
Yeah. So that's number one.
Yes.
Like, they can back out in their inspection period. So if it's 10 days, 7 days, 15 days, it doesn't matter. If it's an as-is contract, as-is means that they have the right to inspect and they have the right to back out.
Yeah.
So that's that.
Exactly.
But what happens, so I know this gets very crazy to explain this, but we finished our inspection period. What's the next step? Well, next step is loan commitment, right?
Yep.
Typically those are around, I say
20 to 30 days.
They should be somewhere around 20, 21 days,
yeah.
But sometimes they're 30. I don't particularly care for that because that 30 days, you're just waiting to find out if the buyer's getting a mortgage.
Yep.
But what does the sellers always say? Well, I thought they were approved.
Approval doesn't mean anything because that can change at any point during the
Yeah, what happens if they
contract.
go buy a car while they're doing it? Because
They could lose their job.
they lose their job. Like, because imagine, right? They didn't use their best friend to buy the house. Their best friend's mad, and the best friend says, you should go get that new car you've always wanted before you buy that house.
Of course, sabotage.
Sabotage. They go buy that new car, and now guess what? They don't qualify. So, so let's get to the point where we get our loan approval comes. It's the day of the loan approval. What do you always say? What most women never do, right, is stay silent.
Oh, yeah. As a seller, stay silent.
The day that it's due. And then the
On
next
it's
day.
due. Yeah, because it's the buyer's responsibility per the new terms of the contract with the updates the last couple of years. The buyer has to give an update whether they receive loan approval, and this is all before the end of the loan approval. So one, whether they received loan approval and they're moving forward. Two, they didn't receive loan approval yet, but they're comfortable moving forward.
Which turns it into a cash deal, which is not really a
No,
cash
if they
deal.
give notice, it'll stay as a loan. So then you have the
But what happens if they can't? I get it, but it's still
property-related
technically.
conditions and stuff. It would still be.
Oh, property
active.
related. Oh,
They
really?
could use property-related conditions later on. So this is the importance of giving notice as a buyer.
I learned
because-
something new today.
because it retains
Other rights in the contract.
loan approval and all the rights in the contract.
And let's remember, let's go back to property related conditions after we finish this, but because that's important too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So it used to be an appraisal. That's not in there anymore. They took that out. It's really property-related conditions is the big hunk of what can be used to get out after the loan
Okay,
approval.
so
has
buyers
been-
and buyers agents, listen carefully.
they need to definitely give notice. And the contract literally says it in 3 straight paragraphs what would happen. Give notice if you have it. Even if you have it, give notice.
How long do they
because
have to give notice though?
They have to do it before the end of the loan approval period.
So it can't be the day after,
Can't be the day after. It has to be the day of at the latest.
by 11:59
By
p.m.
11:59 and 59 seconds. I wouldn't wait that long, but yeah.
So just an
definitely
email would do.
An email suffices, not a text message.
Text messages
So,
are no longer
text
considered to be
messages-
legal.
Yep. So text messages are not good enough, but an email is. And so what I do when I have a buyer is I'm talking to the agent, I'm talking to the lender, I'm talking to the buyer, saying, where are we at? The mortgage, the lender comes back and says, we have loan approval. All right. I ask the buyer, we have loan approval, we good? And they say, we're good. Give the notice. That has to go to the realtor for the seller. And I try to get the closing agent on there too, so everybody sees that email coming through. Or if you as the realtor for the buyer are sending that email, make sure it goes to everybody on the transaction that's actively working
I mean, I've had
on it.
2 realtors go past the loan approval period.
It happens all the time.
And then the next day I'm like, send an email out, hey, like, where's the loan approval? Because now at that point their money's gone hard.
Of course, it becomes a
But-
cash contract.
But then
at
I
that
tell
point.
the sellers like, okay, but good luck on getting this money.
That's a tough.
So
tough
this
part.
this is what everybody wants to know, right? Everybody wants to know, how do you get their money?
Negotiate first.
You need $100,000 to make it really worth it, right? 50,
Not
25?
even, 25, 20, something like that. My goal and what I try to say to people is if it's not at 5% at least,
Right.
then you're looking at a very small deposit usually. I mean,
Right.
but
a lot of people don't want to give it. So what do we do in a market that is slow? Like, I see inventory. I see my crystal ball tells me inventory is going to pick up.
100%.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing list. I mean, people are throwing like, come here, like my crystal ball says listing inventory is going to be the highest that it's been in the last 3 years.
Yep.
That I could tell you. Like, I have enough experience to know the feeling and what I feel right now. So that's first and foremost. But with that happening, right, and there's less buyers, it's going to take a typical time of 4 to 6 months to sell these homes. So, like I have an offer right now. They are not willing to give more than $5,000.
What's the purchase price?
$500.
So you're looking at a very small percentage of a deposit there. Mm-hmm. So I mean,
1%.
literally 1%. So what
I
happens?
asked for more. They said no. They were willing to do a shorter loan approval period, but still the closing is still 45 days. So in the end, you get your loan approval, then it doesn't close. They're probably not, like, I walked away from a $4,000 deposit with new construction back in 2000, 2001. Like, I changed my mind. I didn't want to move to Boynton
Of course.
or Green Acres, wherever it was. It was far, and I was like, oh my God, I'm over this way, girl. Like, freaked out.
100%. Northwest Broward's the place to be.
I thought Green Acres was the place to be.
Could be.
That's what the song says. Oh, you're too young. See, this is what happens when you get these millennials on in their chair.
Hey,
They don't know. Do you even know who Lorena Bobbitt is? Like,
Of course.
Oh, okay. All right, good. Whew. Okay. And for those of you who don't, look it up. So
Google it.
Google it. What's that? I'm just kidding. I'm an old person. I'm in Facebook.
No, you're not.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're talking about how do you get this deposit? So let's go to commercial break. But when we come back, I want to talk about how do you get their deposit? I want to know, like, is this impossible?
Not impossible, but hard. Very difficult.
Yes. So stay tuned for our amazing sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how do you get their deposit? I want their deposit. They didn't close. I want their deposit. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
At JK Closing Attorneys, we do all of the same things that a title company does, but with the benefits of being a law office. We can help with residential real estate, short sales, commercial real estate, refinances, 1031 exchanges, and FIRPTA withholding.
Contact JK Closing Attorneys today at 954-332-3111. Again, that is 954-332-3111.
Whether you're buying, selling, refinancing, or building your dream home, you have a lot riding on your loan specialist. Max Fish, a top 1% mortgage loan officer in the nation, will give you a same-day qualifying quote. Max Fish is committed to providing his customers with mortgage services that exceed their expectations. Ensuring that you make the right choice for you and your family is his ultimate goal. Contact Max Fish today at 954-729-6933 or max.fisch@nwmcorp.net.
Thank you for tuning in for Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. To join the conversation, call us at the studio, 888-994-4995 Studio A, or contact Laura directly at 954-650-0827. Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Making Money with Laura Sanders, and I am your host, Laura Sanders. Don't want to forget to tell you that we are doing 0% second mortgages to get your home ready in tip-top shape. So if you're thinking about selling and you don't know where you're going to get that money, I can guarantee you that even my friends that do these pre-appraisals, that you will get more money by fixing your house up before you go to market. So make sure to call me at 954-650-0827. Again, I have Nick Fiorello here with me, and we're talking about how do you get their deposit when they default on the contract. They've missed their loan approval period. The appraisal, which we didn't even talk about that. Like, we got to talk about the appraisal, the property conditions causing you to get out of the loan, when that is in effect, when it isn't in effect. So let's just say we have a client, they've blown through all these conditions. Here we are, closing date comes, they don't close. Seller says, I'm making a claim to your deposit. The deposit's 10 grand. What do we do?
It's important to first make the claim. So what I do is if it looks like they're going to default, I will say if the buyer defaults, the seller will be making a claim on the deposit. That's a day or two
How long do you
before.
have to do that? Like,
That can be the day of closing.
but can it be like 2 weeks later?
It can be, but then
Unless
the
you-
escrow
well-
agent's going to be sitting in limbo. Everybody's going to be sitting in limbo.
But if you're trying to renegotiate the deal, right? But like, you can't come to an agreement, right?
That's when you usually know. When you can't come to an agreement, when you're trying to get the closing date extended, the seller's asking for something in return, a reimbursement, proration, whatever it is, making the deposit go hard or a portion of it go hard. There's different things that are negotiated. If that comes to a standstill, then you're kind of getting the appearance and the message, so to speak, from the other agent that the buyer's not going to close.
Shouldn't there be, though, some kind of law about like an agent being the lender and the realtor at the same time? I mean, isn't that a conflict of interest?
Sounds like it to me. I don't like when they're intermingled like that. There's definitely some complications with it. Where I'm experiencing.
I just
one
think
right
it's
now.
like pick one or the other. Like pick your lane.
Exactly.
Like there's nobody else to talk to.
Especially if you're not doing your job right or not being communicative
Yeah.
to everybody, which you need to be when you're both of them, because the
Right.
lender needs to keep everybody updated with the updates, and the buyer's agent needs to be communicative so we know what's going on. We don't know what's going on when somebody's not communicating and somebody is both parties to that.
Right, right. So I guess the other thing is, okay, so I guess rule number one, if you can, and if you can't, then it's a discussion you have with the seller. Listen, I don't like not taking less than at least 5%. In New York, it's like 10%, like hands down, right? And I feel like in New York, like, you go to a lawyer to write the contract, right? So you know there's a lawyer involved. Like right now, when you're dealing with a realtor and they're not being communicative with you, right? They're not communicating with you. Like, what do?
It's tough. I mean, for one particular case I'm dealing with now, I've had to call the title company, not getting any responses after tens of emails to them. So after I finally got a manager on the phone,
And they never got back to you?
Never got back to me. So it's something that it's very difficult. And now we're trying to claim a deposit and trying to negotiate an extension, whatever it may be. We're trying to get some of that deposit money in exchange for the default to the seller in exchange.
To let them have the house, right?
Exactly. They want to buy it. It seems like they want to buy.
Well, you don't know, because
but
the thing is that we don't even know if they're represented by an attorney, right? But they're represented by a title company. So could you technically call them?
I could call them and ask for an update or ask if they've heard anything.
Because they're really not represented. If it's in a title company not run by an attorney.
But they're handling the transaction.
So what happens? And so you're not allowed to talk to the buyer?
I'm not allowed to talk to the buyer, but I'm allowed to talk to the closing agent, and they're the one facilitating
Yeah,
closing.
but they're telling you that they don't have, right? That they don't have the contact information to the buyer. Like, how do you don't have contact to the buyer?
It makes no sense. So for me, I'm not going to reach out directly to a buyer. I'm going to go through all the other channels.
Right. So to get the deposit, it has to go to an interpleader,
Well,
right?
the whole long story to get there. First, you have to try to negotiate. Then you blow past the contract, you can't negotiate. Then, all right, there's a period of time where you're trying to negotiate and nothing comes to terms.
I've seen that be years, but okay, go ahead.
Could be. Then the contract requires that you have to go to mediation. So mediation is the first step before the interpleader. Mediations where two parties come together, you have to hire a mediator. Both parties split the cost of the mediator for the mediation.
That's when
And-
both parties are at least willing to talk.
Exactly.
Because sometimes like one is like, no.
I know. I just had one. I just had one where both parties were. The buyer just blew past all the contingencies, all of them,
And they didn't probably want to pay half of a
they
mediator.
didn't want to pay. They
So
did.
when if they don't want to pay for the mediator, what happens?
Then it comes down to, okay, you're breaching the contract now. So what do you want to do at that point? If they're breaching the contract, then the seller has an option if they want to go sue them because they tried to mediate, couldn't mediate, and then go sue them, or us, or any closing agent could send them money. We don't want to hold the money for forever. I mean, I don't know why a closing agent would. Some do, maybe. I don't know, but that's another person's business and their prerogative.
Get enough of it, you can buy a Ferrari until you have to pay it back, right? I'm just
Don't
kidding.
take anything out of there. But it's something where we're going to pass it off to the court, and then they're going to fight it out, and they're going to litigate over it. But then they're going to lose money. They have to pay their attorneys. They have to pay the losing party's attorneys. They have to pay our attorneys' fees. So by the time they're done with all of that, if you have a $5,000 deposit, there's going to be nothing left.
I know this is like really off topic, but back in 2007, 8, a lot of those title companies went out of business, right? So if you had a dispute and it was still sitting in their account and they closed down, right? Don't they take that money with them?
They shouldn't. It's in
But
a trust account.
But
or
somebody
an
has to
escrow
find
account.
them, right? Usually you can't find them afterwards.
Usually they're not just going like that and leaving. They're winding down their affairs and they're going to
Oh
settle.
no, they
all
were
that
not
stuff.
winding down anything back
They
then.
should be. But
Everybody was winding down to like Mexico back then.
maybe they did. And
Yeah.
S out of luck
Yeah.
trying to get that money, but then you have to go through the legal procedures and try to sue them.
But you could have lost your money during that time frame, right?
Could have. I don't know. I wasn't practicing then, but
Yeah. I
you
was.
know.
Told you.
So I mean, it could have happened. but-
Instagram, Facebook. Instagram, Facebook.
Hey, Facebook. AOL.
AOL. No.
Yeah, an
Okay,
AOL
funny.
email.
Okay, so now, so you've told us like the process, which is like all these different things that has to happen in order to get the money. So we were talking about property conditions, and you said that if they blow past their loan approval period, right, which is typically somewhere between 20 and 30 days, sellers don't let them give you 45. Like, you really need to know what you're reading, and you don't know. So you have to depend on someone like me to kind of walk you through the steps to say, this is what this is, right? So property conditions. So some examples of that would be, like, for example, budget doesn't meet the requirements in a condo, right? Which I think that should be done during the due diligence. So if they give you a loan approval, does that mean, or does that not, is property conditions still a thing?
Only if you give your disclosure and the notice that I was talking about earlier. That notice
Says that, oh, you're still waiting on a property condition.
No, so the notice is 1, you have loan approval, you're moving forward. 2, you don't have loan approval, but you're continuing to move forward. Or 3, you don't have loan approval yet and you're backing out of the contract. Obviously, in that case,
So sellers realize that they can still get out of the contract,
the
right?
buyer could get out of the contract up until the loan approval period if they give the notice. And after the loan approval period.
Right.
if
That's
they
why
give
we
the
don't
notice.
want your loan approval period to fall on top of your closing date.
Exactly.
So you should always have a buffer of, like, I think at least a week, because you shouldn't be packing up your stuff until you know that they have loan approval. And if you can't do it in a week, then you need to really sit down and go over that timeline with your realtor. That's why you should be hiring me.
Definitely.
But I'll keep saying that till it subliminally gets through everyone's head, right?
When they intermingle like that, you run into some issues.
Yeah,
But
but-
mainly property-related conditions.
But sellers don't know. They don't understand.
They don't.
If you don't tell them and you don't show them, they don't know.
They don't. I mean,
And the realtor doesn't care. Not me, but some realtors, they don't understand themselves, or they just don't care. They just want to get their commission. So when it falls apart, like, maybe it's me. I'm a little pessimistic sometimes, you know, but so, okay, so let's go back because we have about 3 minutes left. And I mean, this topic could just go on, right? So that's why we had to come back this week.
Of course.
Okay, so they give notice that they have loan approval. So how much longer do they have for property conditions?
Until closing. You know, if
That's
something
ridiculous.
comes up, it's what the contract says. So if something comes up, let's say you have a condo, there's a big roof issue and they can't get insurance or whatever, and then they can't get a loan because they can't get insurance, property related condition. They can back out if they gave the notice, either one of the 3 that I told you prior to the loan
But if they
approval
stayed
period.
silent,
If they stayed silent, it becomes a cash contract, they can't use that. Then they lose all of the benefits of the loan approval period and what that brings in the contract, and then they don't have that to back out.
now they don't have to physically give you something. They just have to. It has to be an email from either the
email.
realtor or the lender. It doesn't matter who it comes from.
I
So
would prefer it coming from the realtor. It's more
really, not from the lender.
the lender too, but I want what we do
Mm-hmm.
is I have the buyer sign a document. When I'm representing a buyer, when I have a buyer sign a document. It has those 3 options on it. I have them check it and initial which one they selected, and then I send that in an email and write it in the email what the option they selected in here. Send it to the listing agent, send it to the closing
Interesting.
agent. That's what I do, just so it's double there. I have a signature on it, I have an initial on it, and the buyer, this is the buyer's choice. They
So if
chose
you
to
want to
give
get this
notice.
form, what phone number? If realtors, if you want to get this form from Nick, because I think this is pretty important, what's the best number for them to reach out to you to get this form?
954-779-5000. Or you can email our office at legal@jkclosings.com.
So I would just say, hey, Nick, I was watching you on the radio. I saw this form you're talking about. You know, love to catch up with you and get some more information on that. I think that, you know,
Of course.
would be something that realtors really need to know. So, okay. And then the last thing that we talked about, so we talked about property-related conditions. We talked about getting the deposit, which is get more money, realtors. We need to get more money. And
it
if we
worth it.
can't get it, then I think we need to talk to the sellers to let them know that we we either don't take this offer and we wait longer for another offer, or we just take the risk. And you need to know the risk. And what was the last thing I said that was really important? Property, we're running out of time. So property conditions, the loan approval,
Deposit, you mentioned.
deposit. There was something else. Oh my God, and we're not going to remember it. So
No.
guess what? Next time, I will remember the next time we come back. I want to thank everyone for watching Making Money with Laura Sanders. I hope you learned something tonight, and I hope you keep tuning in every Thursday night at 7 o'clock to hear what we have to say. Thanks again, and keep listening to Making Money with Laura. Also looking for sponsors. So if you'd like to be a sponsor and like to be interviewed on my show, give me a call, 954-650-0827. Make it a great night.
Thank you for tuning in for Making Money with Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. To join the conversation, call us at the studio, 888-994-4995 Studio A, or contact Laura directly at 954-650-0827. Laura Sanders, a name you can trust. We look forward to seeing you next week.